Week number 7 here on the RAS YouTube channel. If you're joining after the fact, you can go through each and every game as we preview all of the games on the Week 7 card and give picks where available, answering every questions as we go along the way. The timestamp down in the slider will let you go from game to game as well to get caught up with everything that you need to see. And for everybody joining live, thank you very much for coming back for another week here on the channel. See a couple familiar faces in the chat already. John, Carlo, Jordan, Devin, Michael, Chris Gray as well, back for another show too. Says it's the highlight of the week for him. I feel the same way. Highlight of the week for me too. Glad to be able to do these and glad to see so many people coming back each and every week. If you have any questions, I'm really going to push for them in this show. The last couple have been kind of free flowing, but let's get a lot more questions coming in. Let's get a lot more thumbs up on the video down below too. If you're here, you can hit that button. If you're watching on the app, you can also contribute in the chat as well. And then down below in the comments, anything that you might have as you're watching after, please drop those comments in down below, not just in the live chat. Will allow me to answer them on the YouTube Shorts and do a specific video to give a bit of a deeper dive. Let's get into it. Not waste any time. Start going through the games. A couple things I want to get to first. First and foremost, let's do a fun little back and forth here. These are the current DVOA ratings from FTN. These used to be on Football Outsiders. They got moved over. In the first column that you can see, I love these overlays as you sneak up from behind it. First of all, if anyone ever wants to help with graphics, and that's what you do, please message out. Here we have in the left column the current rankings. You can see San Francisco 1, Detroit 2, Buffalo 3. And in the right column, it is what they were last week. So San Francisco was number 1 last week, still number 1 this week. Detroit was number 3 last week, still number 2 this week. As you look at this and you go through the teams, I'll give everybody about 20 seconds. Find a team to you that stands out as being too high, and then find a team to you that stands out as being too low. Did this a couple days ago. Thought it was really interesting, really fun. Sam Hoppin, you're slow on the cumulative and aggregate power rankings this week. So I switched it over here on the live stream to DVOA to go through this. So as you're looking at this, pick out a team to you that's too high and a team to you that is too low. And then I'll do the reveal of mine. I circled a couple teams that I thought were too high or too low. I'll give everybody a couple more seconds. Let me know in the chat if things agree. So again, team that is too high to you and a team that is too low. We'll go a few more seconds here. All right, here's what I've got. So I put blue is neutral, green is too low, red is too high. Let's talk about the too highs first. Tampa Bay, I think, playing with the most unsustainable offense in the NFL. They are refusing to throw the football in first and second down. Through 6 weeks so far, they have the fewest pass attempts on first and second down, do the Buccaneers, running at a ridiculous rate on early downs, and then it just forces them into really tough third down passing situations. I don't think the Baker Mayfield, who leads the league, the Buccaneers, believe it or not, lead the league in third down EPA per play for the season. That's just not going to be something that holds. So I have the Buccaneers as too high. I have the Texans as too high as well at 17. I think realistically, this is probably 8 or 9 spots too high for what the team is. Obviously, they've performed very well so far throughout the season, but having them right around league average, to me, within these ratings, just a little bit too high. And then the other one I have circled as too high, the Arizona Cardinals, who are 25th. You can see they've dropped down from 21st from last week to 25th this week. Remember, this is a team that was 3.5 wins coming into the season, and they were bet under heavily. And so now they're kind of middling in that sort of lower tier. I think this is a team now, especially with Connor out, that we really see drop down into their rightful 32nd ranking. In terms of teams that are too low, I think the Chiefs at 5 is kind of silly, but just sort of reflects some of the struggles that they've had on offense. And then obviously Cincinnati's an easy one with Burrow looking 100%. I think that's a team that can figure it out. We'll talk about their safety issues as we get to the games a little bit later. But yes, that's certainly for me, Cincinnati really stands out there. The Jags, they're an interesting team that I have at 8, have them as neutral. They keep getting bumped up. It's been a lot of defensive improvement the last couple weeks that have led to that increase. And then the Lions, of course, at number 2, Getting a little bit high for Detroit. Do you really have Jared Goff on the Lions at number 2 league-wide? I think that's a bit of a stretch. It's a very good football team. Don't get me wrong. I'm coming around on the Lions, but yeah, that certainly stands out. Let's go through the comments here. Appreciate everybody for jumping in. Nat H says the Eagles. Nat H wants more Monday Night Football talk. I saw that message. I'll get to it. Eagles too high or too low, Nat? Jacob says Lions too high, Cowboys too low. Where were the Cowboys in this one specifically? The Cowboys were 11th. Interesting from Jacob. If the Cowboys are too low, where should they be if they're currently 11th? Nick agrees. Lions too high, Jags also too high. With you on both of those. Nat said Eagles were too low. Good check in there. Sawyer says the Rams are too high. So I had the Rams circled initially. They're at 12th. They're up from 18th. This was a team that was bet under heavily in the preseason. Offense has played really well. They're up quite a bit. Let's talk about the Rams as we get to that Cardinals game. I think they still may have a little bit of room to go yet. But good call there by Sawyer, certainly on the Rams being too high. Fitty, Lions at 2. Remember, this reflects in-season performance. So that's kind of where you get to Lions at 2. But yes, agree. Matthew says too high Detroit, too low Cincinnati. John says Cincinnati too low, Seattle too high. That's interesting there as well on Seattle. Good call out there. We'll talk about Seattle too and what that defense has done the last couple of weeks. We have Saints too high from Danny, Jags too high, Cincy too low from Jason. Detroit seems to be peaking the market, and Green Bay too low. I think we might still see that floor fallout from Green Bay as well a little bit further. Devin says Dolphins high. That's surprising to me. Interesting to see that. Let's read through a couple more. Graham says Rams too high. There's sentiment within the chat for that too. Bengals too low. Alan says Bengals too low. We're also seeing a lot of Browns high. Ryan Roberts saying the Bengals low as well. Saints too high from a couple people. Jags pointed out as well. So good to see a lot of sentiment within that. Appreciate everybody putting their comments in the chat for that as well. We'll just pull it up one more time, but seems like sentiment here. Bengals definitely too low. We're also seeing a bit of a split between Cleveland and Jacksonville being too high. Lots of people on Detroit too high. Those were the ones that really stood out. And then a couple of call-outs for the Saints at 13th being too high, which I think are pretty good as well. Papa Cal says 190 watching, only 8 thumbs up. Let's hit a couple more as we get into it. A lot of fun games to talk about. John K., Cincinnati worth a future bet. Schedule looks rough, but if they get in the playoffs, they've shown they've been able to win against AFC's best. Big issues at safety for Cincinnati. They lost Von Bill. They lost Jesse Bates in the offseason. Both of those guys absent from that secondary has proven to be a bit of an issue. Got quite fortunate to win against Seattle last week. Really misleading box score all the way around against the Cincinnati Bengals. And so let's see if they're able to overcome that. I think that's a big issue that they're going to have to deal with over the next couple of weeks. But that certainly stands out as a big issue that they have. And so not only is the offense coming around and trying to figure out everything with after that slow start, but they have some issues on the other side as well. Dustin James, what's the best source for inactives? Where do you watch NFL press conferences? We talked about this last week too. You got to run around now. It used to be all kind of condensed into Telegram. Some teams do YouTube. Some teams do Twitter. Some are doing Twitter live streams at the top within the app as well. You're seeing those notifications as they go live, but you just have to really run around now to sort of corral all of it. In terms of inactives, 90 minutes before the games, all the team accounts will tweet those out as well. So you kind of have to hunt for it a little bit, but that's requiring a little bit more work than it used to. Let's get to the games. And please, guys, keep the questions coming as we go through the games. If you get them within the game as well, I can answer them right away as we go. Jags on the road at the Saints. Kicks off tomorrow night, Thursday Night Football. The Saints right now a 1-point favorite. This was as high as 3. Obviously, the Trevor Lawrence news yesterday comes back. On the podcast this morning, on the Simple Handicap on Apple and Spotify, I talked about the injury alert systems within the NFL and how they're kind of all changing how they compete. And it really kind of, to me, looks a little bit evident on how they're pulling data, has led to a lot of inaccuracies this year. And I say that from a pulling of information or a pulling of quotes. Obviously, all of these places are scraping beat writers from Twitter, and it's become a race to who can get the alert out quicker between Roto World, Fantasy Life, and Underdog. They're just competing back and forth for who can get it quicker. And we saw yesterday a good example of that. I won't go into the full details, but essentially all of these apps pulled a quote from CJ Beathard initially, but they didn't pull the full quote, which said that Beathard was taking all of the first team reps at practice. And so it presented it like Lawrence is very likely to play, but the actual full expanded quote got into how Beathard was still taking the first team reps and Lawrence was dealing with the knee injury. And so keep an eye on that as you go throughout the season. We've seen Rappaport wrong a lot on his injuries, which get quoted everywhere. We've seen a lot of media guys struggle with injuries as well. And all of these alert systems are pulling all of that and at times misrepresenting what is actually the quote or what's coming from the players. So just keep that in mind. A couple things stood out to me within this game. I like the Saints in this game, especially at Pick'em. Big injury on the defensive side for the Jags to Campbell, who's their best defensive back. He ranks 6th league-wide in yards per coverage snap allowed. And what really stood out to me on Twitter was once he went out last week, everybody was talking who covers the team about how the defensive structure for the Jags really collapsed and fell apart. And Minshew was able to find a little bit more success. It's a Colts offense that stalled out a few times, had some bad turnovers. The Jags got pretty fortunate. But a lot of the Jags increase rating-wise, we just talked about them, 8th in DVOA, getting bumped up a lot, has been from the defensive improvements. And without Campbell, their best defensive back, replacements were really getting picked on. And so with the Saints offense struggling within the red zone, struggling to find big plays, this was looking like a bit of a tough matchup for them again. But now you have a Jags team that has to figure out how to sort that defense out on a short week, but also is dealing with the Lawrence injury stuff. Peterson had a press conference on Tuesday. He just looked wiped after the last 3 weeks. 3 big wins, 3 grinded out wins, except even the Atlanta game was tricky in London. It was just a lot going on for the Jags with the travel and everything. And now they go short week to play the Saints, a defense that's been really good. You get Beathard in there potentially. I do think there's a decent chance Lawrence starts the way this is going. But if he's less than 100%, I just like the way that looks overall. So I would look at the Saints on Thursday Night Football. I just think that this is a tough spot for the Jags overall. And what I like about the Saints from just a bit of a subjective angle, Derek Carr at the end of the game last week in what was a very misleading box score for the Saints, who lost at Houston multiple times inside the red zone, multiple times inside the 10. Carr came off the field, ripped his helmet off, threw it, and got right in the face of Pete Carmichael. And for Saints fans, you'll probably share the frustration with Carmichael, who didn't want the OC job in the first place, tried to get his way out of it, and then got extended in the offseason. But the Saints brought in Gruden to help install the offense. They had different guys calling plays within the preseason, and now Pete's really kind of struggling with the play calling overall. And Derek Carr essentially called him out, not only on the sideline where things got really heated, but in his apology, Derek Carr kind of backstepped it a little bit, but still was like, we have communication issues from the sideline to me to getting the play in, especially when it comes into the red zone. We have to get that fixed. And Dennis Allen came out and he's like, we're fixing this week. We've got to get it sorted out. And so Allen says Carr and his red zone struggles are concerning. It's really been on Carmichael and the communication getting the play in that has put Carr in bad situations. And so I think that the Saints actually do sort this out. I think that we see them go to the ground game a lot more. I think that stands out. And so I like the Saints in this one. Let's see the Lawrence news. How could you accurately handicap adjusting for a team potentially missing a player like Lawrence? Well, there's going to be a big downgrade if he's out. We saw this market go to 3. I do think he plays. I think he'll be less than 100%. If he doesn't, this game should be Saints 3.5. And so it's definitely not here now. I think you have to look to the Saints. The injury to Tyson Campbell is enormous. Arguably the biggest defensive injury that is being talked about the least so far throughout the course of the season. I think it's a huge impact to that Jags defense overall. Let's move on to the Sunday games. Couple more questions. Olave over. Don't know yet. Let's see the numbers. Winston might be an upgrade over Carr. I really think the Saints sorted out with that communication from the sideline, and Carr looks a lot better going forward. I really think that gets sorted overall for sure. Trevor won't be mobile if he plays. Absolutely not. When he got up off the ground from the injury, it just looked awkward, and it didn't look good at all. And so, I don't know. We'll see. Let's go to Sunday. Falcons on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about the Bucs a little bit when we were looking at those. I think they're playing at a level that they cannot continue playing at. Dave Canales does not want to switch away from running on first and second down. Believe it or not, the Bucs were league best on third down through 5 weeks. Last week, they go 2 of 12 against the Lions. And we saw what happens to their offense. It doesn't matter if Evans is healthy and out there. It doesn't matter what Godwin is doing. Mayfield was missing throws. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. If you put a guy in third and long under center time after time after time, and you have Rachaad White, who's 46th in yards per carry versus expectation, continuously running and banging his head into the wall on first and second down, the offense is just not going to have success. And so, like, the Bucs were 10th in EPA per play. They were 24th in success rate. You see that gap. It's like the Packers early season. It's got to level out. You can't play like that, especially when that huge jump is coming from third down. It's not sustainable. No team can do that. We saw the Bucs kind of take their first step back last week against the Lions. Now they play a Falcons defense that's top 5 in a lot of key categories. And so I don't think the Buccaneers finally break through and find success on the ground. And I don't think that Mayfield continues what he's doing on third down at any rate. So I think the Buccaneers are pretty overrated at this point. They're laying 2.5. I would love a 3. I don't think we get it. I think the Falcons can cover. I think the Falcons and teasers are a really good look as well. And here's what I'll say about Atlanta. Weeks 1 to 4, nobody could get away from criticizing Desmond Ridder. It was, we're not having enough passes. Pitts isn't getting enough attention. London isn't getting enough attention. Ridder isn't throwing downfield enough. And all people could do was praise Bijan Robinson. Here, we've now 2 weeks in a row seen Desmond Ridder throw for 300-plus yards. We've seen Kyle Pitts be more involved. We've seen Drake London be more involved. This is what everybody wanted, right? Weeks 1 to 4, it's all anybody wanted. Everyone was upset with Smith. He's running too much. Let's get the ball moving. Let's get Pitts and London involved. That's what you got the last 2 weeks. Comes with turnovers. Absolutely. Ridder's a young quarterback, right? But now it's criticizing Smith for doing what everybody wanted him to do the first month of the season. Which do you want as someone watching this league and following it? I'd prefer what we've seen the last 2 weeks. If anyone deserves criticism, in addition to Ridder, who lost 40% win probability with his 3 turnovers, which were just backbreaking. I'm not saying they weren't terrible turnovers. Bijan Robinson had arguably the worst game a running back could possibly have in this day and age. He had an 8% rushing success rate last week on 13 carries. Nobody's criticizing Bijan Robinson. Let's give him Rookie of the Year, despite putting up just a god-awful performance that did nothing to help the Falcons in any way. He doesn't get any criticisms because everyone's pointing the finger at Desmond Ridder. And so I just want to get that out there, and I think that needs to talk about. Everyone wants to move to Heineke. Well, if you move to Heineke and he's doing the same situation, is he going to take the equal criticism too? Like, how do we have it both ways with the Falcons for how this is going? Every week it changes to sort of fit what people want to complain about when it comes to the Falcon. And so I think it's promising that they've thrown for what they have the last 2 weeks, and I think it bodes well against the Buccaneers. So like the Falcons here, like them in teasers, definitely quite a bit. Raiders on the road at the Chicago Bears. Please, guys, keep the questions and comments coming. If you fit them in within the game, it's great, but I'll try to get to them as we go as well throughout. Raiders on the road at the Bears. Raiders a 3-point favorite. Justin Fields was announced as doubtful on Monday. When you see doubtful on an injury report, 95% of the time, that was the stat that was accurate to the beginning of this season. I haven't seen many doubtful tags. 95% of the time, if a guy is doubtful on the injury report at the end of the week, he misses. And so when I hear doubtful to a quarterback on Monday, very likely means he's not playing. There was a report just before we came on. I saw that he wasn't practicing. It's very likely going to be a Tyler Bagent game. That's not a good thing for the Bears. However, they may catch a bit of a break because there's a couple things here that are at play. Jimmy Garoppolo is uncertain for whether or not he is going to play on this game on Sunday. So that could mean they go to Brian Hoyer. It could mean they go to Aiden O'Connell. It is a drop either way in any of those situations. And so you are getting a drop off going to either of those guys. But also now you have just a massive win game, right? This is forecasted more than 20-mile-per-hour winds, gusts much higher. And so that's really going to slow down the game. It's also going to bring into play a lot more running. And so you have two backup quarterbacks likely playing in a game with a very short total with wind. That leads to just what is going to be a close game. You have the Raiders, who as a team just live in close games because of how they play on defense, conceding everything in front. And on offense, there's just nothing explosive from the Raiders ever. 40% of their offensive output has been on the scripted first two drives for Josh McDaniels. Think about that. They've scored 100 points. 94 of them have been on offense. 40 points of the 94 have been on the first two drives of the game. The Raiders in the second half, they're 30th in scoring per third and fourth quarter. They're 31st in second quarter scoring. This is a team that has thrived early with those scripts, with those plans. Once it wears off, they've been able to do very little. I think the Bears defense, getting all the guys back in the secondary last week, kind of showed the improvement against Minnesota. The Bears played without 3 starters in the secondary for 3 weeks in a row. They got all the guys back last week. I think that matters in this game. And teams have been able to really bracket Devontae Adams and limit his production after his couple big games early in the season. And so I think that the Bears can employ that strategy as well. And even if it is Badgett, we've seen teams, no matter what, be able to move the ball on this Raiders defense because of how they play in coverage, and they're not changing. And so I can only look at this and point to taking the Bears getting the points, but I think you can sit and wait to see what kind of QB announcement we get, because if Jimmy is able to play, I do think that this ticks up and heads towards 4. I don't think that this is fully adjusted through. These are two teams that are rated essentially equal in a lot of ratings overall. The Raiders a little bit higher. You're now seeing the Raiders lay 3 on the road. It's a pretty big adjustment here. And so if you get a spot where you have a backup quarterback here on the road in the weather game, just laying that field goal or more just seems like a stretch. Dustin asked, do you like DJ Moore over? Because Badgett might pass comparable to Fields, more of a knock on Fields. I don't agree with that comparison at all, but I do. I went back and looked. It was late in the game. Badgett started completing a lot more to Fields and getting that connection going. Moore's closed like 48.5 the last couple of weeks. He's absolutely going to be lower. Let's see if he gets into the 30s. But just in general, I don't want to be betting on an over for a receiver with a backup quarterback in a win game. That doesn't entice me a lot, but his number is certainly going to be a lot lower. Ryan says under with 2 backups with time to prepare in bad weather. It's going to make for an ugly game, and that sentiment was definitely shared within the channel as well. Alan says a letdown spot for Las Vegas. Bears back-to-back home games off a bad loss should be a better spot. I thought they played relatively well against Minnesota considering the circumstances. I think with those secondary guys back, that's going to be a big boost all the way around. Max Crosby have a day. Absolutely. Could see that for sure. If Nathan, Paul Enzo, if Nathan Peterman gets in, he'll be looking for revenge. Yes. Good one there. Browns Colts. You guys had Browns comments above. If I've missed anything in the last 10 minutes, please let me know. Actually, we've been on for 23 minutes, so a little bit longer. Mary Kay, who's just getting ridiculous coverage of the Browns. She always does. She said that Watson is planning to speak to the media later today. And so usually when you hear a player who's on the injury list or has injury concerns, but he is speaking to media, that usually implies that his status is being upgraded. Guys that are injured or going through treatment don't get the media side of things. And so with Watson getting back into talking to media, that's usually an indication that he would be trending towards playing. We saw a release on the Browns, who were sitting at 2 earlier this morning. One came from Hitman. I'm not sure if Bob was on it as well. But I do know that there was a release on the Browns that took this up to 3. In this spot, I like the Colts, but I'm not running the bet it. Just let's see how high this is going to go. If Watson is in, this will push up higher. I think it's going to be too much for the Browns, whose offense, regardless of who has been in there, has struggled a ton the last couple of weeks. The Colts and their linebackers, I think, can defend the run of the Browns relatively well. And just off of that win against San Francisco, where it was an all-in defensive effort, I think that the Colts are going to be able to stay competitive within this game. I think that Gardner Minshew is is way worse than what people treat him as and present him as. But this to me is a spot where the Colts last week, we really saw Steichen and his game planning specifics on display. First drive of the game, he threw the ball 14 times. It was a long drive, didn't get in the end zone. But he threw it 14 times because when you're playing an opponent like Jacksonville, that's where you want to target it, right? It's going to be very tough to run against it. The Browns' secondary has been playing exceptionally well, as has their pass rush. I think it becomes a much more run-focused game plan for the Colts against this Browns defense. Don't get me wrong, the Browns defense, best unit in the NFL. It's going to be tough to do anything against them either way. But Steichen is the type of coach who I don't think is going to leave Minshew out to dry in the pocket all game long. I think that it's going to be a lot more Taylor, who's seeing his usage increase. I think it's going to be a lot of Moss as well. I think the Colts can keep it close. And so, again, just like the Bears, just like the Falcons to an extent, there's no real rush to go in and get it. But I do like the home dog in this situation, as I do with Chicago, as you just kind of wait for the Cleveland news. Bryce, I'll get to that in a second, but I was going for Alan's comment. Awful spot for Cleveland off the huge emotional game versus San Francisco, but Cleveland defense could carry them against unpredictable Minshew. I think that that's exactly right, for sure. That's kind of the negative to that as well, is that Minshew just really struggles because he struggles against a lot of teams in the league. He's not what people make him out to be as a quarterback at this point in time. Lions on the road at the Ravens. Baltimore, a 3-point favorite, total 42. Seems like there's potential for this to come back to 2.5. That would surprise me a little bit. But I do think that people are really buying into the Lions. It's a very good football team. What Goff did last week on the road against the Buccaneers, laying points against pressure, against the blitz, that is something that he has struggled with his entire career. That win was 100% because of Jared Goff last week. As good as the defense for the Lions played, Goff carried that team, and that was one of the few times in his career in that situation against an opponent like that he has done that. The question is, can it repeat itself this week? I don't believe that it can. I would look to the Ravens in this spot. I think it's, again, the Lions are playing excellent football. There's no doubt about it. I have been against the Lions in years past as this has come together. I'm not going to deny that they've played very, very well. I think it's tough for Goff to repeat this now a second week going on the road to Baltimore. This is also a game with a ton of wind. A lot of East Coast games impacted by weather. It's going to be a lot more difficult for the Lions to find success throwing the football. You have the injury to Montgomery out of the backfield, who was their key running back. Now it's probably going to be a split between Reynolds and Gibbs. I don't think that is going to be as effective as what they had going with Montgomery, who they would desperately need in this spot, given the weather conditions. I think that makes it really tough for Detroit as well. You also have a situation where when you think about the style of game, right? Windy, you're going to have a lot less passing. You're going to rely on running. In week 2, Aaron Glenn did a press conference following the Kansas City game. If you want to go back and watch it, I think it's really, really interesting. He spoke about how the Lions struggle under his coaching against running quarterbacks. You think back to week 1, Patrick Mahomes had a very big game. I'd challenge anyone to go back and look last year at what the Lions did against mobile QBs, like legitimate running threats at quarterback. And you will see time and time again what Aaron Glenn is saying about this team and this scheme struggling against mobile QBs come to light. Some massive numbers on the ground for opposing quarterbacks against this Lions defense. You think about wind, think about a competitive game. You have Lamar Jackson. What is he going to do a lot of the time for the Ravens? And now you have the Ravens going again into week 2 with their offensive line back to full health. And so there you go overall within that spot and that sentiment. Allen brings up a spot. Any concerns about Baltimore coming back from London? Felt like an all-in game from them last week, and we're still fortunate to get the cover despite dominating the box score. I would like to see some data point spread wise on these teams coming back. We talked about it last week. I don't know the specific answer. However, I feel like the market is more than able to price in teams coming back from London at this point, now that it's been going on for 4 or 5 weeks. And so I don't think that alone becomes something that you can just lean on to make a bet. And where I see that that's a different scenario is when teams go to London. We're seeing teams handle that very differently, and you're seeing the results really reflect certain strategies for how teams go to London. And so that's what stood out to me more so than teams coming back. And so that doesn't necessarily worry me. Something I would say too is John Harbaugh put a ton of time, effort, and prep into that whole travel situation. And so I think that we see a spot where the Ravens are pretty prepared all the way around. Connor says Lamar wants to throw. He's consistently said that. Yes, he has. All of the throws have been very short. A lot of throws have been really tight to the line of scrimmage, but it doesn't matter who you are. When you have 22 mile per hour sustained winds and gusts up to 35, nobody's throwing successfully in that. And so I think you kind of have, he's not going to overrule that. I think it's a spot where the Ravens look to run quite a bit. The Lions are going to have to do it too. That's going to matter quite a bit as well. So Jacob says Lions are number one in opponent rushing yards per game. Yes, I think that that's going to go into a lot of the pricing. But again, this is a very different running game attack that they would be facing in Baltimore, and one that they've really struggled with under Aaron Glenn overall. So that certainly stands out to me within this. We're at the half an hour mark, so we'll kick it up a little bit and get through the next couple games. Bills on the road at the Patriots. Appreciate all the questions. Please keep them coming in as we go here. Keeps the show going around, and very interesting to see thoughts as well for people on these games too. Bills, Pats, what's going on with Josh Allen? He had the shoulder injury in game against the Giants. He comes back and in true Josh Allen fashion, downplays the injury just like he did last year with the elbow. He's as tough as they come within the NFL. But once you saw the elbow injury last season, accuracy dipped. A lot of the easy throws, especially to Diggs, those kind of dipped a little bit. The offense needed to change. And so now that it's maybe a grade 1 AC joint issue within the shoulder, what does that look like? I think a couple things are going to happen. I think we're going to see the continued lack of emphasis on Allen running perhaps accelerate a little bit, where he's encouraged to run even less than he has all season. I think there's also going to be some encouragement for the Bills to get back to the traditional ground game that they employed. I go back to the Raiders game. That really stood out. A couple games this season, they've really leaned on Cook and more of a traditional ground game. I think we see that return this week. I think the wind within this game, which again is looking like it's going to be the worst wind game of the week, I think that probably pushes that a little bit further for the Bills offense overall. And you think about some of the guys that are down for New England. Uche got lost last game. They lost Judon off the defensive line a couple weeks ago. Bills are going to be able to run on the Pats. We're going to be able to see teams move the football on the ground against New England, something they haven't been able to do consistently in seasons past. And so these injuries for New England mounting, I think we see the Bills go to the ground game. And I think we see the shoulder injury for Allen, despite him going out of his way to downplay it, kind of really pushed the run game. I also think McDermott buys into that a little bit too, with how his defense has sustained a lot of injuries. He might try sort of turn the variance knob down in games quite a bit too. And so that certainly stands out to me quite a bit. And I think we'll see the Bills offense really employ that, and the win kind of makes that a factor. In terms of the Pats offense, I don't know. I mean, you want to attack the Bills secondary with all their injuries and issues, but Mac Jones probably couldn't do that on a good day with the way that these wide receivers are struggling to get open. And what are they going to do in a win game that impacts that too? So really not a lot of upside here for the Pats, but I do think that from the Bills' perspective, we probably see their offense look quite a bit different within this game. Obviously, teaser legs are in play. This week has 10 games that are between pick 'em and a field goal. That may have changed with the Browns getting up to 3. That was the most games in the last 20 years of the NFL with games that would fit that basic strategy teaser criteria. So that certainly stands out to me as well. Ian says Malik Cunningham game. This is interesting. They brought him on the active roster last week. They didn't use him to throw any passes. He was out there for, I think, 5 or 6 snaps. If you think about quarterback runs, wind, we could absolutely see the Pats employ that overall, and maybe we finally see Cunningham involved within a game. They used him in the preseason, a lot of receiving routes, but he also had that big drive. I think it was against Houston in the first week where he was using his legs quite a bit too. So yes, that could be something interesting. Love the constant Lulu wardrobe. Best dressed sharp in the game. That is the first time anybody has said something positive about my appearance in very many years. And so that stands out. Bryce Miller, you get comment of the day so far as well. Let's keep going on. Washington Commanders on the road at the New York Giants. There was something that just came out from the Giants overall. You have a spot where Andrew Thomas is still not practicing. Evan Neal is not practicing. Matt Pert is not practicing. John Michael Schmitz is not practicing. And so all of the offensive line starters for the Giants are not practicing. What do you do at this point? You have the Giants go through just an all-time emotional spot for Daboll, going back to Buffalo, through multiple headset throws, Tyrod Taylor coming back in. It's the emotional spot, right? And to lose in that fashion, and now to reset with more O-line injuries, still uncertain about Jones, go back home and host the Commanders, who the one bright spot for Washington all season long has been their front seven. Boy, this just seems like a tough spot for the Giants overall. Now, you can look at this price and you can say that the Commanders laying 2 with a little home field here given for the Giants is too far of a price to lay, but what are you going to get from the Giants off of that game with potentially all those O-line starters down, where the Commanders' big weakness has been their secondary? Think back to the Bears game, right? Think back to last week and how misleading that box score was all the way around for what Atlanta was able to do. Nobody thought high of the Atlanta passing attack. They go for 300 plus. Nobody thought high of the Bears passing attack. DJ Moore almost has 300 yards himself, right? You exploit the Commanders by throwing deep and attacking downfield. If the Giants don't have an O-line and it's still Tyrod Taylor, are they going to be able to attack downfield? Are they going to have the time to do it? Makes it a tough spot all the way around, certainly all the way around. Stewart says, hard to get up after that Buffalo game. I completely agree. I think that stands out in a big way for sure. Give Daboll some pads. Well, he's big enough to play on the offensive line the way that he's trending. You can tell there's been late nights at the office. Maybe not as late as McCarthy, who said he worked 120 hours to put together a mediocre game plan to just squeak by the Chargers. But yeah, the stress is mounting on Daboll. You can tell that physically too. So maybe he can play O-line and get the play calls in a little bit quicker as well if he's right out there next to center. But yeah, Commanders at 2 certainly stands out to me. But I know that price is going to be one that you can look at and say is absolutely too big. Comment from Crazy Carl. No questions this week. Just wants to say thank you. Love your shows. Thanks very much, Crazy Carl. Appreciate you coming back all the way around. See you in release shows as well as watching these shows too. So thanks for the support. Thanks for watching the show. Arizona Cardinals on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. We talked about the Falcons being a great teaser leg. I think Seattle's one of the best teaser legs of the season, if not the best so far. That stands out to me. There was a comment that the Seahawks were potentially overrated within these ratings. They are 10th in the league. Let's point something out. Last week, defensive guys returned in a big way. And so Adams, Diggs, Brown, Woolen, and Witherspoon were all on the field for the first time this season last week. And I tell you, from just a subjective comment standpoint, some of the stuff that came out of the Seahawks team after that game about how the defense is coming together and how the secondary is finally healthy and how all those guys love playing together, really impactful stuff that stood out to me in a big way. Because, believe it or not, the Seahawks through 6 weeks, the best run-stopping unit up front in the NFL from an EPA per play perspective. And so now you have the secondary behind that front seven coming together and getting healthy. This is a very dangerous defense that's continuing to improve. Overall on the season, just ratings-wise, people are looking at the Seahawks defensive unit 16th in the NFL. So there's some room to improve relative to how this unit is being treated. That certainly stands out to me against the Cardinals team in this game. Without James Conner, that offense looked really different against the Rams. There wasn't that extra gear. People were able to sit on the pass of Josh Dobbs. I think that was a really impactful loss for Arizona. Now you have Arizona going on the road, a team that we talked about at the start, kind of coming back to earth, getting back into that 30-second spot after a hot start, starting to see this defense for Arizona really, really struggle too. And one other interesting note I'll point out about the Seahawks. In the preseason, after they drafted Smith and Jigba throughout the OTAs, throughout the preseason. The sentiment was, we want more 11 personnel. The Seahawks last year, incredibly 2 tight end heavy. That's the personnel that they lived out of. They wanted to go to 3 wide receiver sets because it frees up the run game with Kenneth Walker, but it's also where Geno Smith has a lot of success. We didn't see it all season. They were sort of reverted and went back to their 2 tight end sets. Last week, they ran their highest rate of 3 wide receiver sets in the entire season. Jackson Smith and Jigba, his prop price closed at 27.5, finally broke out. His depth of target has gone from like 1 to 2 to 3 to 5. Last week, it was 7+, right? So all of a sudden, the Seahawks offense is starting to turn into what it wanted to be at the start of the season. Why did it take this long? The injuries to the offensive line. They needed to have the extra tight ends to protect because they were down not one, but both of their starting tackles. And so they brought the tight ends to play next to the tackles to give Geno more time. And so the Seahawks are transitioning now from this team that needed those tight ends in to block, that went against what they wanted to do, against how they drafted, against how they wanted to shift their offense. Now, with these guys coming back on the offensive line that are healthier, with tackles coming back, they can now run the offense that they want to run. And we saw what that looks like last week against Cincinnati. Great numbers for the Seahawks offense, just had some really bad luck when it came into the red zone. And so I think we see not only the Seahawks defense continue to improve, I think we see this offense really turn the corner for Seattle as well. And so the people that said Seattle was a little bit overrated, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there's room to improve on offense and defense as this team is able to do exactly what they want. And so have to tease Seattle. Geno, awful record. ATS is a big favorite. I think that can change this week. I don't agree necessarily with this last comment as well. Someone said that they were concerned about laying the 7.5. I actually like Seattle in this spot overall. And I think that we really see this team change quite a bit in the next coming days. And so that's something just to think about as you look at this overall. Seahawks, a team that are really going through a lot of changes. Please keep the comments coming in. As we saw right here, good to see JSN snap percentage increase after the bye. It was a big shift for Seattle in this offense overall. He's going to give a lot of these guys a lot more space. Let's move on to the next game. Steelers on the road at the Rams. This is currently Rams 3. The total is up to 44. This game is one of 2 games so far this week that has seen the total increase. We've seen nothing but unders come through all the way around this week. And what stands out to me is so far through 6 weeks, the unders that are hitting at 57% equal the exact same number of unders that hit through 6 weeks last season. The records are identical. Both of these last 2 seasons have started with crazy unders. This is the one game this week that has a bit of an exception. So why is there an exception? First of all, we released it, which pushed the number up a little bit. And that's obviously going to change it, but we haven't seen resistance yet. But the Rams are a team that have seen their totals get smashed up the last 2 weeks. And so not counting this week, we saw last week against Arizona, it was bet up 3.5 points. The week prior, it was bet up 4 points against the Eagles. So the market loves the Rams and the overs. Those games were like 46.5, 47, got bet up to near 50. This game all the way down to 42 has now been bet up to 44. So it's just like a different range in class for totals and what would require overall. And so that kind of, first of all, stands out as the Rams being identified as this over team within the market. Stuart Rivers comes in with the comment, Rams have no running backs. Does this imply passing game will be more efficient? Well, 2 things stand out. If you take Kyron Williams away, it takes away the safety valve overall. We know Sean McVay is a guy who, when he has a running back that he loves, likes to use him, right? Gets really conservative, especially when he has a lead. That's always the worry when you're betting a Rams total, especially in a spot where they're favored and they're at home. They get the lead and McVay sits on it. You now remove that from the equation for this game because not only is Williams out, you also have Ronnie Rivers out. And so the Rams still right now are scrambling to figure out what they're going to do at running back for this game. And so when you think about that as a whole, right, you have a spot where it's likely more passing overall for the Rams. You have this McVay pull-off scenario that doesn't really exist like it usually does. And all of a sudden, you're seeing the Rams, who are identified as an over team, now playing with a shorter total, all of a sudden in a situation where they're going to pass more, which is exactly how you want to attack the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their weakness has been the secondary. And so with cutback for the Rams, I think they're able to move the ball. I think the Steelers give up a ton. You can't really expect a lot for the Steelers out of the bye. They might get Deontay Johnson back, which would be a boost for the offense. They also have McFarland, who, before he got hurt, looked awesome in the return game as well. So that certainly stands out to me a little bit too. I think the Steelers can play their part to the over. And this Rams defense, it is horrible beyond Aaron Donald. It somehow has not really been tested all season long. In that Eagles game when it was, the Eagles are the best at sitting on leads in the second half running the football, except when they play the iron run defense that is the New York Jets and they decide to throw a little bit more. So the Rams defense has been disguised a little bit too. If Johnson is able to return, that would absolutely give this offense a big boost too. But I think Pickens is in line for another big performance as well against this Rams secondary. So that certainly stands out to me quite a bit. So like this over, still, even if you can find that 43.5, I think we see points in this game for the Rams at home. And it stands out as the game moving up because it is, I think, the best over of the week. Chargers on the road at the Chiefs. I don't have a lot on this game. I have two generic thoughts. So please help me out in the comments, guys, if you have burning opinions on either of these two teams. I think two things about the Chiefs. First and foremost, they got to figure out this wide receiver situation. They're working through it. It's just not improving. They got to figure this out. That's going to come with time. That's going to stand out and make a difference. That's first and foremost, number one, kind of the obvious thing. Number two, maybe less or so, the short yardage stuff for the Chiefs is really starting to get a little bit of the spotlight shone on it. They're 29th the last 2 years on 3rd and 4th and 2 or less. They're really good when they're at the goal line. They're able to get it in the end zone. Anywhere else on the field, really struggling. And we saw against the Denver Broncos a couple occasions. They tried to get really cute with things. They tried to utilize different looks and personnel and just got stopped on these short yardages, killed drives, settled for field goals. They got to sort that out. And once they do, that'll lead to a lot more extended drives, a lot more potential for points. But it's really becoming a point of focus. Part of the reason that this struggle is happening is because Mahomes hasn't attempted a QB sneak in like 4 seasons. And so teams who have to prepare for the 31 other teams in the league that have the QB threat or QB sneak as a threat, they don't have to prepare for that for the Chiefs. And so they're able to sort of defend it in a lot more comfortable way. And that's leading to the Chiefs having a lot of short yardage issues. Now, the Chargers, on the other hand, my thought on them is, first of all, you take Mike Williams out of this offense and they have some serious troubles because if Keenan Allen is limited and boxed up for a little bit, this is an offense that really doesn't have a great true number 3. I don't think Palmer is that true number 3. And Quentin Johnston has been eliminated from box scores the last couple weeks as a whole. And so I'm a little uncertain about this Chargers offense and what it is or what it wants to be. And defensively, this team that has a defensive-minded head coach in Staley is not getting any better. This market as a whole reminds me a little bit of the Vikings spot against the Chiefs, where the Chiefs were laying this big of a number. The Vikings got bet, was a similar price, comes down. I can see it, right? But I just don't trust the Chargers defense in this spot to get a lot of stops. And so to me, it's a stay away game. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but this to me for Herbert struggles, for the Chargers defensive struggles, for how this offense looks without the true number 3, I just don't know. Stewart says, is Herbert the most inaccurate passer in the league? I don't know what's going on with him. Like, are we just blindsided by a great 2020 and now this offense just isn't working for him? Maybe it's the lack of Kellen Moore helping him out. I don't know. He doesn't look nearly as good as he is being made out to be. After every single game, it seems to me like the film guys find a way to defend him because of glimpses here or there that stand out. And I just don't know. And so, boy, tough game, both sides. No real strong opinion in it one way or the other. We have the Packers on the road at the Broncos. 3 more games left on this Week 7 card. Dustin James, I'll go back a second. Coaching mismatch quite big. Certainly stands out for me for sure overall. Packers, Broncos. This is another one. I just don't know. I would look at this, and my initial reaction was you got to run and bet Denver. But then you start thinking about all the issues that the Broncos have, even with the extra time coming in. This Broncos team to me just really worries me from a betting perspective. I don't know if Peyton's starting to lose the locker room a little bit. I don't know what Russ is at this point. Defensively, outside of Surtain, I just see just issues all the way around. I don't think that the Broncos are this historically bad defense that it was made out to be after 4 weeks. I think that they're better than that. I don't know if it's fully been adjusted to accepting that within the market, as we have seen this total hang around right where it opened. But boy, what the Packers have struggled with offensively really stands out to me. It's very similar to the Buccaneers. A lot of boomer bust, a lot of third downs. There's arguably no team that's looked worse over the last couple of weeks comparative to the Broncos as the Green Bay Packers. And now the Packers are laying points on the road at Denver. They were laying points on the road at the Raiders, and the market smashed the Raiders. That was late money in the week. The Packers were around a 1-point favorite Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and onward, as well as game day on Monday night. I mean, the Raiders just got blasted. And so is that same sentiment going to come in against the Packers? Are they going to believe in the Broncos? I don't know if that's the case, because against the Chiefs, nobody wanted to support the Broncos whatsoever. And that was a win game with the total coming down. And the Broncos were around the 10-point underdog, and nobody bid it all week, right? And so it's just like, it was just a big anti-Broncos sentiment. And so it's another tough game all the way around. Sunday Night Football, Dolphins on the road at the Eagles. What do you guys make of this one? Again, these last 3 games on the card just stand out to me as really tough spots all the way around that I just don't have a glaring opinion on. And just like I would with the Broncos, I looked at this and I'm like, you kind of have to bet the Eagles in this spot. But then again, yesterday, lots of money comes in on Miami. This was 2.5 for the Eagles, gets down to 1, was threatening going to pick. A little bit of money comes back the other way on the Eagles. They're now sitting a 2-point favorite. Total in this game, 51.5. It is currently sitting right at that number or slightly lower. 51 is showing. And so again, that Steelers-Rams game is the unicorn on the board with over money coming in. The Deuce of Hearts says Super Bowl preview. Interesting thought within that one. Devin Barth says Dolphins defense won't be able to get off the field. Jalen Ramsey did return. He's eligible to return as well, but it was listed that he will not be playing in this game. He has 21 days to officially come back. So maybe that's a next week or a week after scenario. But yeah, that certainly stands out a little bit there within that one too, for what that Dolphins defense could turn into. But I look at the Eagles. I think their offense has gotten away with a lot with the coordinator change. But other than that, I don't think that they've played to their full potential. And maybe we see it here against the Dolphins, but I just don't have any thoughts within this one. And then to wrap up, we go 49ers on the road at the Minnesota Vikings at San Francisco, a 7-point favorite. Haven't seen any Vikings sentiment come into the market yet. This is sitting with the Niners off of that loss on the missed field goal at the death last week against the Browns. When I look at this for the Vikings, last week offense was noticeably different without Justin Jefferson. That's kind of the obvious thought, right? But what stood out to me was neither Osborne nor Addison was able to step up and make an impact as the number 1 wide receiver. They had to go to TJ Hawkinson as the wide receiver who led the way. He finished with 6 for 50. And that was against the Bears defense that had really struggled against tight ends for the duration of the season. And so I start to wonder now, you have Cousins with the trade rumors kind of swirling indirectly, which he is downplaying weekly at press conferences now. You have an offense searching for answers that hasn't found any success on the ground. And you don't have a clear situation at number 1. And maybe this loss of Jefferson, not only with his production being taken away, but what he was opening up for these other guys is now taken away, putting them in focus. There may just not be a true number 1 all the way around. And so if neither of Osborne nor Addison can step up, they're never going to replace Jefferson. I'm not trying to imply that. But if this is now a Kirk Cousins-led offense that is full of a bunch of fringe number 2s and number 3s that look a lot worse because Jefferson isn't drawing all that attention, now forced to be the number 1s. Well, against the 49ers defense, this is not going to look good in any way. And there's been no ground game for the Vikings all season. That's been the one spot where teams have been able to do something against the 49ers defense. If the Vikings can't do that, this is going to be a repeat of what the 49ers did to the Giants, where they're just sitting on these short throws across the middle and taking away the tight end and Hawkinson, and you have these young wide receivers that are going to be in a really, really tough spot. On the other side, we don't have the update for Debo yet. We're starting to get more of that. This is a Monday game, obviously, so we're going to get that later. My impression is that CMC is not going to play, which is obviously going to be a blow. However, let's talk about this for a second, as we see this game at 7. Davenport was lost yesterday for the Vikings. He was ruled that he's going to miss a couple of weeks. You take him out of the pass rush for Minnesota, and that is a massive blow. We talked about the importance of Tyson Campbell within the Jags as kind of these under-the-radar injuries that really should stand out a lot more than they do. This is a big injury for Minnesota all the way around. He's had a fantastic production so far. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. That really takes away from Brian Flores. This blitzing, the aggressive nature of this defense puts these secondary guys in a bit of an island again, especially if you take out all this ability from the pass rush that the Vikings have. Brock Purdy last week struggled against the Browns. There was wind. There was bad conditions. But obviously, the best pass rush in the league in the Cleveland Browns. It was getting home consistently. We know that Purdy really struggles when he's pressured. That may very well not be the case against Minnesota. And those throws that Purdy is good at making down the field could absolutely be in play consistently against this Vikings defense, just based on how Flores calls his defense in the scheme that is there. And so here's the big thing that I'm kind of getting at. Kittle splits without him are insane. Yes, Crazy Carl was ahead of me on that one. That could be big. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk could have a massive game as well. If this becomes kind of pass heavy against the Vikings because CMC is not there, this could be a massive game for Purdy and a pretty big bounce back for the 49ers. So, yeah, you're looking at them as a teaser like Dustin certainly stands out too. But a lot of upside, I think, for the 49ers offense and just how they play overall within this game. So certainly looking at the 49ers, I am on the side, and then teaser like certainly stands out to me as well. Previewed all the games in under an hour. That's pretty good. Any questions to wrap up, guys? Please leave them in the live chat. Give it a thumbs up before you close the video if you've been watching. Even if you've taken away just one little interesting fact. That's kind of my goal. Do the previews. Give someone something interesting to work off of that could inform a bet that you might make or help you think about games in a little bit of a different way. If that was the case, hit the thumbs up. There's a subscribe button. Also, if you're watching this too, the comments below that are like attached to the video below, if you leave a comment about something, it allows me to use it in a YouTube short. I can make a short video and answer it specifically. I want to end first, before anyone goes away, with a comment that I got that was really good from Jacob. I've been a follower of your work for a few years and love the content you put out. Lifelong football fan. This is awesome. That gets your takes on the games as I go to wager each week. Wondering if you could touch on this in an upcoming episode or even the weekly preview. I'd ask the question live, but I have to watch those at night due to work schedule. I'd love to get your take on red zone offenses and short yardage situations across the league as a whole. I'm not sure what the numbers would say, but as a passionate NFL fan over the past decade plus, it seems teams are underperforming on offense at a higher level in those situations than in years past. Maybe bad QB play, coaching, but would love to hear your thoughts. Here's the cool side note. Grandma blew the horn at the Vikings preseason game this year for the longest season ticket holder. 60 years of heartbreak for Grandma Vodal in this game. 20 plus years for myself as a Vikings fan. Funny to hear you chat about the Jets in that light too. I can certainly relate to that as a Jets fan, but that's an awesome comment. Stuff like that I can put into a YouTube short, and I will do that for Jacob as well. So if you want to leave the comment down below in the video, I can get to that and keep the content going. But I appreciate everybody for stopping by. Thank you very much for joining the show, asking the questions. Carl, Connor, Jason, Graham, Stuart, Matthew, all of you guys jumping in with questions. Appreciate it very much for everybody who has taken the time. Please leave those comments down below, and I will answer them as the week goes on. I will also, for everybody asking what the best teaser of the week, I will do that in a YouTube short as well. Thanks, everybody, for joining the show. We'll see you back at the same time next week, Wednesday, 9:15 a.m. Pacific.